very good morning to all our dear listeners and viewers out there. Welcome to Acfim Talks. Let me start by apologizing for a late start. We've had a bit of a technical hiccup here and there, but nevertheless, we promise to be here every Friday. And yes, we are here. My name is Felix Kafuma, who is moderating today's edition of Acfim Talks, and we are discussing a very interesting topic. It's a follow-through of on our series that we promised to run with that are concerning the coffee unpopular coffee deal, and also the Luvoa the Luvoa Specialized Hospital, both contracts, big ticket contracts being handled by an Italian investor, Pinetti. And for the last almost coming to a month, the country has been awash and embroiled in these two scandals. It's publicly being debated. Parliament, media is reporting on the same subject, and we think we need also to continue having this discussion on Acfim Talks. But this time we look at an angle in a broader sense that speaks to procurement, the procurement, how procurement is handled in Uganda. And in this case, we are looking at what are the visible hands, what are the invisible hands. And under the title, Pinetti, the visible hand in public procurement. So are we today discussing, and with me, I have a guest who is a usual guest, for Acfim Talks, Henry Moguzi, who is a political finance expert, also is the executive director of Alliance for Campaign Finance Monitoring. So it's good to have you, Henry. You're most welcome.
Thank you, Felix. And of course, these technical hitches always happen, but I hope we shall sail through. Good to be here.
Thank you so much, Henry. And for anybody out there who wants to be part of this discussion, please don't forget to subscribe on our YouTube. And we are live on YouTube. So yeah, the links are down there on the screen. We are also live on Facebook. Facebook, it's Acfim. YouTube, it's Acfim Uganda. And Twitter, pages at Acfim UG. And this, indeed, you can be part of this conversation. And every Friday, you'll be getting notifications so that you don't miss any of this. That whatever we will be bringing out to the public. Now, before we start, it's important that I kind of like lay a bit of a background to this discussion. We shall all agree and appreciate that the ultimate goal of public procurement is to satisfy the public interest, and like any government action should be, a good procurement should ideally satisfy, one, the needs of the people, should be fair to businesses, and most importantly, should save the waste of public funds. What also is important to note is that the latest figures on how much we lose to corruption, I think according to the IGG, is about 10 trillion, but 80% of that is lost to procurement. So that is why procurement is of interest when we are discussing this topic of Pinetti, because these two are procurement deals. Now, also what is important to understand and appreciate is the fact that both these two procurement deals, single sourcing was preferred to competitive bidding, and which is not a one-off. We've seen this happen before. There have been precedents before, and I think we shall discuss that as well. But what does this mean when we subject this to the key ingredients that that should be observed that guide public procurement? Indeed, the questions of whether there was value for money, that is one. The questions of whether it was fair to business. The questions of whether these deals, we got the best deal that we're able to save taxpayers' money. And importantly, whether the procurement was in line with satisfying the needs of the people. And to get this started, like I said earlier, I have Henry Moguzi, who is going to help us put this into context, but also appreciate and discuss the whole Pinetti scandal within the procurement, public procurement, how it is managed, how it is handled, and what are the implications. Starting with and picking it off from that, let me actually ask Henry. Henry, I'm so sure that you've observed over time that single sourcing seems to be synonymous with big ticket procurement deals in Uganda. And we've seen the president often having the final say on who takes the contract. Uganda is awash with cases we can point to. The smart tracking project that involved the Russian firm, I think it was called Joint Stock Company, that handled the national ID project. Also, we had the Agua project. Now we have the coffee deal. Before we recover from the coffee deal, we still have the unfinished specialized children's hospital project. Why is it that when it comes to big ticket deals, single sourcing is the preferred format of procurement?
Thank you, Felix. And of course, to our viewers out there, when we speak about public procurement, we are speaking about a very important subject, because for those of you out there who are not so familiar with the whole subject of procurement, when it comes to management of national resources, you know that national resources are managed through a budget, and the budget is a piece of legislation because it has to go through a process, and the final process requires an approval by Parliament. And the reason this is so is because there are guidelines, there are standards that are used to manage states. But when it comes to national budgets, and like the budget for the current budget we are working in is 45 trillion. It will be 47 for the financial year 2022-2023. But about close to 80% of the national budgets are expended through procurement, which is why you'll not be surprised to find that most of the corruption scandals, especially those that are grand in nature, have something to do in one way or the other with procurement. And therefore, also, then it should be also an area of concern for every citizen, because that's where your money is being expended. And that's where also the economic hitters, the hitmen, they call them economic hitmen, are targeting. Now, you spoke about the principles that are followed in procurement. Of course, standard practice requires that a country has a law that guides on how public procurement is conducted. And this law must also be guided by certain principles, among them transparency, because we are talking about people's resources. Therefore, they must be seen to be expended in a transparent manner. Number two, fairness. Because 80% of the national budget is expended through procurement, therefore, government plays a key role in ensuring that that procurement is distributed fairly, that all sections of the economy and the population get a fair share of that procurement in order for development to be balanced and well distributed. But also the other one is that there must be some semblance of economy, that you don't just spend money because you must spend them. You must show a degree of responsibility, but also due diligence, conducting due diligence and prudence as well, financial prudence in managing procurement. Now, the procurement law we have in place in Uganda, a procurement law called the Public Procurement and Disposal of Assets Act, which was enacted in 2003. So we have an institution that enforces it, the Public Procurement and the Disposal of Public Assets Authority, headed by a chairperson. The technical head of it is the executive director. Now, in procurement, there are methods you can use that are prescribed by law. One of them is competitive bidding. Competitive bidding means you go out there and invite whoever has an interest to bid. But the law also allows you to do targeted bidding. Targeted bidding means that you want to procure a certain service or a good, and only a few suppliers can supply it all. The other suppliers have issues, and therefore you can tip a few, 3 or 4, to supply. But also there's one they call single sourcing. Single sourcing is that you don't have to advertise to call many interested parties to bid. You go for that person. But the principle is that single sourcing should be the exception, not the norm. What we are seeing in Uganda today is that single sourcing is becoming the norm rather than the exception. And the reason it is becoming so, and you rightly put it, if you look at most of these big ticket deals, you can start with the AGOA one, the one we are familiar with, where we had to procure an investor, I think represented by a certain Thai guy called Kananathan, and we were promised hell on earth. I mean, we were promised heaven on earth. Up to today, we have not. We are still questioning ourselves what happened with that deal. If we look at the deal for national IDs, the same thing happened. The deal for installing chips for tracking motor vehicles, which is being tagged, securitized, and classified, is single sourcing. And then now the notorious ones of Ruowa. When the government wanted to procure the services of an international company to help set up and manage a specialized hospital, that went single sourcing. The coffee deal now has gone single sourcing. But you see, the thing is that in most of these deals where single sourcing has been applied, you get to see that there is also a strong underhand of the powers that be pushing this deal. Most of these deals where single sourcing has been applied have been confronted with resistance from legislators, a section of legislators, from a section of civil society actors, from a section of academia, but also other peace-loving Ugandans. Those that wish it well have criticized this, but you get to see that the president especially has a hand in it and pushes it personally, writes letters, and eventually the powers that be take the day. So the common thread running through these procurements where single sourcing is applied is that, number one, they are big ticket deals, meaning that huge volumes of money are involved. Number two, that they are faced with resistance where the president single-handedly pushes and eventually takes the day. So that's an area of concern. The first area of concern is that if it's the president who acts for and on behalf of the citizens of Uganda, and the reason that is so is because without seeking the mandate of the citizens of Uganda, he cannot govern, which is why every 5 years we go to election so that he can renew his mandate. If that mandate expired and he did not renew it, he won't have it. The Constitution of the Republic of Uganda, Section 1, Article 1 says that all power belongs to the people who shall exercise it by delegating. So he has delegated authority. Even when he comes out and says, I don't work for you, he knows. Because if you do not work for us, why do you have to come back to us every 5 years to seek re-election? So he knows that he serves us, and in the very interest of the people, you hold that power in trust, and you must exercise it in the interest of the people. But the people have been coming and saying, we don't want this deal, and they've been expressing their views through their elected leaders in the House, representatives in the House, but the president has always insisted. So that is a point of worry. Yeah, and that's why I want to leave it for now. The common thread that is running through, the breaches that are happening, the bigger question is, what is the interest? Because if you're not acting in the interest of the citizens who delegated their power to you, and to whom you return after every 5 years to renew your legitimacy and mandate, then whose interests are you serving?
Okay, thank you so much, Henry. There is when you were sharing something interesting. I kept asking myself, because you shared the principles, and I kept asking myself, okay, just looking at the coffee deal alone, was transparency exercised in the way the process was managed? Was fairness exercised? Was there fairness exercised? in terms of, was there due diligence done? How was there prudence in the use of resources in making such decisions? And I'm asking myself, okay, if these are the principles that govern public procurement, if we are to subject these principles to the way the coffee deal or the specialized hospital deal was handled, how would you fare those two deals against these principles?
So thank you. When you look at how these two deals came into play and how the signings of the agreements was achieved, you'll see a breach of all these principles. You'll exercise, you pardon me where I am, there's quite some significant noise. So there was breach of the principles of fairness, because going single sourcing and insisting on a lady that has demonstrated by word and deed that she's not only incompetent to deliver the hospital that she promised, giving excuses that are lame, such as it was raining, such as there was COVID, as if there were no buildings rising during those periods, as if the rain was raining like tsunami. But then you insist and give her a deal in an area where she has no competence in. The truth must be told. If you got me here, me, I am not a fisherman. So if you take me to do business in the fishing, I'm just going to muddle through because that's not my area of specialization. So this person, I am sure if you showed this person a coffee seedling, she will ask you, what is this? Because she has probably never seen one before. So you get a person that is coming to invest in a business they have never lived in, worked in. This is a joke. And so there was no fairness. That was breached. Transparency was breached because we do not know how this was arrived at. And you get to see how the deal is signed and the agitations to have it cancelled. And then there is arrogance and insistence that the deal cannot be cancelled, as if cancelling it would mean the end of the world, as if putting the deal in place would suddenly transform the lives of Ugandans. You look for the value add of this deal, you cannot find. You look at the bigger majority of citizens saying the deal is bad. You look at technocrats saying the deal is bad. You look at the manner in which institutions that are relevant and should have been consulted were sidelined, and ask yourself questions for which you cannot find answers. And obviously, then you get to find one answers, and that answer.
I think I lost Henry somehow in the process. You'll excuse us. I think where he is, there's a bit of the network is a bit erratic, but he was trying to subject the principles of procurement to the coffee deal, and I think we lost him out there as was trying to make a point around exercising issues of fairness, transparency. But I think also there's a bigger question of the due diligence, because information since then has been streaming through on who exactly is Pinetti, where have they done work before, the company called Finas, and what is their trail in terms of having done work in similar areas, and some of the information coming through does not necessarily comfort us or give us conviction or even give us confidence that Pinetti was under Finasi company was the best choice. In fact, in some of the literature that we've been accessing, you look at them and you realize that she has done work in other countries, but in some other countries, some of that work has been highly questionable. Her financial muscle has also been highly questionable. I think I think this week, whether Wednesday or Thursday, I think it was Wednesday, when it also came out to light that he actually never had the money, so he had to cash. He had to present the land which was given to as one of the incentives for this very I think under the lower deal, he was given land as an incentive and went and used it as collateral to access loans, and so even then he never had the money. So you look at if you subject these principles to to the way these two procurements were handled, you really see, you really, I think every Ugandan out there is justified to be alarmed, um, um, whether we are really, we got the best, we got the best candidate for these two big projects, and whether we shall get value for money out of these two big projects, and I think that explains also why the public is up in arms, and almost everybody is contesting these two deals, especially I think the coffee deal has been one that has galvanized the entire public in uproar, and they're like, wait a minute, what is this we signed up for? And I think that's the point Henry was trying to make. As Henry gets back online, it's just important for me to point out some of the key facts surrounding the public procurement. In the bigger scheme of things, Pinetti is just an example of the other public procurements where somehow we've questioned whether the the interests of the public are prioritized. When you look at the national ID project, I remember very well there was a Russian firm, I think it was a German firm initially that was given that contract, and I think almost a year, close to a year down the road, they had only managed to produce under 1 million. I think they had about 700,000 or 500,000 national ID copies that had been produced, and yet it was also a deal that came through single sourcing, and they were trusted with public resources for a very huge project. And what happened is that eventually the project was now removed from that German company, and I think the security, the army, the security operatives took it over, and have then manned it to where we are at the moment. And probably sometimes I think we also undermine the resident capacity within Uganda, and we then look for the so-called investors, Europeans, Americans, Asians, and I think and we tend to think that they can do a better job than the resident capacity that we have. And I think it's high time we really prioritized local in the local capacity. We need to appreciate, recognize, and award the local capacities, because when you look at the national ID, it's a very good example of a project given to a foreign firm that failed, and then until it was taken over by a local firm. Actually, it was taken over by the security, and they are until now. I think that they've done a much better job. And then also, when you look at the now looking at the coffee deal, I think many coffee dealers have come up and said, but there's nothing Pinetti is going to do that we can't do. If you give us the same amount of incentives, we can do the same job, probably even do a better job. And that clearly shows you how sometimes government overlooks the resident, the local capacity, and clamors for I don't know, it's an inferiority complex. I don't know why in most cases we don't trust our own and we outsource, we go for foreign firms. Yet I think it's important we first look inward before we can look outward. I'm still waiting for Henry to get back online, but in the meantime, probably let's go for a break, and then we see how this pans out.